study, not something journalistic, but very serious, has been undertaken by Mr. Johan van Dijk, formerly of Armscor, who dealt with the DIP at the time. He's no longer with Armscor, but he's almost completed a doctorate on the very subject. And I've checked with him, and Mr. Crawford Brown and others might laugh or fall off their seats, but this can be tested with Mr. van Dijk. And he has been researching all the facts at Armscor and elsewhere. And in this paper of his, he works out the figure of 110 billion for our country just on the basis of the defence industrial participation, the DIP. And it's improving all the time as we speak. I know that Admiral Kammerman has made reference to the Tomahawk, which is getting orders all the time from abroad and benefiting our economy, the defence industry, which has been saved by this whole process, including the jobs there.
Commissioners, Advocate Abu Bakr also had omitted passages from Mr. Modise's address that are recorded by Hansford, including, "I'm heartened by the commitment shown to the acquisition project by both the President and the Finance Minister in their keynote addresses of this parliamentary session." Now, Advocate Labala earlier referred to a speech you gave in Parliament in August 1997, not April 1998, regarding the benefits of the offsets, and your final line, of course, being, "It will delight the Minister of Finance." Of course, it is known that the Minister of Finance was actually opposed to the proposed arms deal because democratic South Africa had inherited an almost bankrupt country.
Mr. Crawford Brown, again, what is the question? Put very brief questions to the witness so that we can all understand what you're trying to find out from him.
Commissioners, Section 217 of the Constitution establishes that when an organ of state contracts for goods or services, it must do in accordance with a system which is fair, transparent, and cost-effective. In other words, the arms deal offsets were unconstitutional and illegal right from inception. And the reality is that the Department of Trade and Industry has now just recently conceded that the offsets were fraudulent, that the arms deal was therefore
Mr. Crawford Brown, otherwise I'm going to stop you. If you want to put a question to this witness, put a question to the witness without making a speech. We have heard what his evidence was. Your questions must relate to his evidence and do not make any speeches which have got nothing to do with his evidence. Otherwise, I am going to stop you from cross-examining him if you continue doing that.
Sir, is it correct that Section 217 would rule out offsets as a possibility and that these requirements of the Constitution were ignored?
I disagree with that.
Well, the reality of the Constitution is the supreme law of the country. And an opinion I will submit to the Commission is a legal opinion that finds that offsets fail that requirement of the Constitution, and therefore the arms deal was unconstitutional, illegal, and fraudulent.
Commissioner, where has that been proven?
Mr. Castle, do you agree with his proposition or you don't agree?
Commissioner, I don't agree with anything.
Commissioner, I'll leave it at that. I will revert later to the issue of Section 2171. Thank you.
When you say later, you don't mean before we excuse this witness?
No, at a later stage I'll refer to Section 217, not before this witness.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to start with. Last time I was told that seniority plays a role. Now I'm not sure between Advocate Kane and Advocate DeForce who will be senior.
Commissioner, thank you for the opportunity. My learned friend and I have had a discussion, and she is happy for me to go first.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Casrils, during the course of your evidence in chief, you were asked about whether there were any bodies underneath or below the Arms Acquisition Steering Board. And you said that there certainly was. There was a body that reported to the AASB, but you were unclear as to the body's name. Does the name Armaments Acquisition...
Advocate King.
Does the name Armaments Acquisition Control Board ring a bell with you?
Yes, indeed.
I would like you now to please have a look at the Department of Defence bundle, which I think you should have in front of you. Many of the documents are ones which also appeared in the bundle of Mr. Steyn, but we have collated them to facilitate this questioning. Please would you open it at page 1, and you will recognize a document there. It is a letter from Mr. Sheikh to the Minister, and the heading is Special Ministerial Briefing on the Strategic Defence Package Programme, Confirmation of Minutes. Do you have the document?
I do.
We do not need to read the entire letter, but it encloses a copy of the minutes. And if you turn the page, you will see that page 2 of the letter contains a number or a list of the copies distributed. And under the heading for action, you will notice that the Deputy Minister of Defence is to receive copy number 4. Do you confirm that?
Yes, indeed.
We are dealing with the minutes for the 31st of August 1998 ministerial briefing, just to refresh you on that score. On page 3 of the bundle, you will notice a document which is at its left-hand foot, dated 1 October 1998, and then to the right of that is a signature. Can you identify the signature, please?
Is this the document which says receipt form from Milsec to Chief of Acquisition? And a signature at the bottom is my signature.
And would that confirm then, if you look at the handwritten portion on the line beneath 3, that you received copy 4 of 7?
Yes, that's right.
I would like you to please now turn to page 4 of this bundle, and you should there see a handwritten note with a date in the right-hand top corner of 1 October 1998. Do you have it?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Are you able to identify this document and describe what it was?
Yes, indeed, Commissioners. It's a document, a short letter or note, dated 1st 10th 98, to Mr. Sheikh, Chippy Sheikh, confirmation of minutes from myself, and it's signed by me. And within that, there's one paragraph where I make a comment that there should be a change to the minutes.
Together, Mr. Casrolls, these confirmation of minutes, these appear in order. Suggest we add to paragraph 11, discussion point relating to the advantage of the dual role of the hawk, open brackets, although this is not apparent in the value system applied in making the military performance recommendation, close brackets. The final decision is for the executive level, and I understand that is your signature. Now I'd like you to explain to the Commission what you mean by the advantage of the dual role of the hawk, please.
Commissioners, I'm referring here to the fact that the Hawk can be utilized as both a trainer aircraft and as well as an operational or combat aircraft.
Mr. Casuals, why was that important to you as at this time?
There were a number of reasons, some of which I've mentioned and are in my submission, Commissioners. And just to restate, the Hawk had a cockpit, an instrument panel that was similar to that utilized in the light advanced fighter aircraft, the Gripen. It was compatible because it was manufactured by the same group or companies involved in the manufacture of Hawk and Gripen. So this was a great advantage for trainee fighter pilots, those who had advanced from the first level, just a very simple propeller-driven aircraft called the Pilatus. And to go through to the advanced fighter, the Gripen, we needed the intermediary, the lift. And the lift, in other words, the Hawk utilized at that lift level, being compatible to the Gripen, would be of great advantage. There was also safety factors related to that as well. But there is an additional aspect which I didn't write about, and that relates to transformation of our Air Force, of our Defence Force. I did allude to it, sir, in my statement about the transformation and the safety, the training to higher level. But we need always to place things in context. And in the transformation of the Defence Force and the Air Force, Minister Modise particularly, myself in support, and Cabinet, I would say as a whole, were very concerned that we should upgrade the recruits from the majority portion of our country, sometimes referred to as our black citizens, who did not have the skills and the ability of long-term training that their counterparts from the more privileged section of our communities and the Defence Force had. And in order to advance such recruits, to be able one day, as some already are, to fly the Gripen, the Hawk would be very instrumental in that sense.
Mr. Casual, still dealing with the draft versions of the minutes and then the signed minute of the special ministerial briefing of 31 August 1998, Mr. Steyn alleged that the signed minute, which you will find in this little bundle at pages 5 to 7, was not a valid minute. And he based this contention on the following. He firstly said that the different versions of the draft minutes in themselves constituted a basis for suspicion. Would you like to comment on that?
I, quite frankly, Commissioners, can't see how he could come to that conclusion when we had a situation where the Director of Acquisition, Mr. Sheikh, had been, I would say, asked by the Minister Modise to draw up the minute. Mr. Sheikh, as we've seen, sent copies of this minute. He started off with a particular draft, which we've seen this morning, and this is the draft I'm referring to, where I say to him, in as much words, this is fine, but you should at least add the point about the Hawk having this dual function. And then we later receive, other ministers as well, receive that second minute, signed by Mr. Sheikh, and we all sign it. I, in fact, find, sir, it very strange, if not bizarre, that there should be 2 other copies of a minute purporting to be from that meeting, which is incorrect, signed by Mr. Esterhuis for Mr. Steyn. That's what I find strange, sir.
Thank you. The other basis upon which Mr. Steyn alleged that the signed minute that you find at pages 5 to 7 of the bundle was not a valid minute was he said that the sub-cabinet meeting did not actually take place. Do you have any comment on that contention?
The sub-cabinet meeting of 31st August in Durban, I understand. I was present as a deputy minister. It took place, which is why the ministers and myself signed the minute. And actually, sir, one of the officials, the invitees, who was present in Durban, Mr. L. Swan, Mr. Lou Swan, the CEO of Armscor, at a meeting of the Council of Defence in Pretoria a couple of weeks later, September, I think September the 16th. I've got it written somewhere. He refers to the meeting, sir, in Durban, and he says to Council of Defence, it's minuted, sir. He says the discussion took place and the decision was taken. That is perfect proof from another source that the meeting took place in Durban with that particular decision. You might help me with the date. I think it's in the main documentation. I think it could be September the 16th, Council of Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Casrals. We will locate that minute. I'm currently instructed that it was on the 16th of October. 18 September. Yes, 1998. So we will certainly locate that. Now, the third reason that Mr. Steyn alleged that this was not a valid minute and not a valid decision was he said that the choice of the hawk was predicated on fraudulent manipulation of information. What were your reasons for the choice of the hawk, and do you dispute that statement?
I firmly dispute the statement, Commissioners. I hold to it, looking at the minutes and the documentation from the time. There certainly are in his statement of Mr. Steyn such allegations. In the minutes, various minutes, he does raise concerns from time to time. He does not make that allegation anywhere. I was on good terms with the Defence Secretary, Mr. Steyn, in that whole period, up to the time of his resignation, and he never once said to me that he suspected fraud at all. And even at the time, at the end of that year, when he submitted his resignation and left, and I had discussion with him as to the reason why, he gave to me personal reasons relating to family. So as I've indicated here last Friday, I found it quite surprising in the invective which he used to make such allegations. As for the other reasons, the motivation for Minister Modise and myself, for his ministerial colleagues, and for the Council of Defence, and indeed the AAC, Arms Acquisition Council, at all stages we set out quite clearly why we were going for the hawk. We've dealt with this, I think, at quite length this morning, Commissioner. And if you wish, I'll go through the 3, 4, 5 reasons or so why we went for the hawk. And it's Minister Modise, I think in a very clear-cut way, who kept ramming home the point that the key reason why at executive level Ministerial and later endorsed by Cabinet, why we went for the hawk as the intermediary trainer was to do with business plan, the advantage to the economy and the industry, and so forth. Very clearly and adequately pointed out. There are other secondary reasons which I've championed, the dual function of the hawk. And I referred this morning to, apart now from mentioning Mr. Swan, I referred to the new Chief of the Air Force, Birkus, who in the minutes later that year makes the profound point against what Mr. Steyn was claiming. And his point was, he concedes, that the Hawk is a better aircraft because of its dual function. The Italian Aero Mafia does not have that combat function. I think it's very, very clear. And this is why, to this day, in retrospect, having to refresh my mind with the minutes, it comes back to me extremely clearly, Commissioners. I am firm on this point, as I was those 16 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Casrals. If you turn to page 6 of the bundle, the DoD bundle, you will see a heading in the middle of the page, Decisions Taken, and we are now in the actual minute of that ministerial briefing of 31 August 1998. And underneath the heading Decisions Taken, you'll see there's paragraph 9. Are you with me?
I am indeed.
You were referred to this paragraph by the evidence leader, and it was put to you that the recommendations of the preferred bidders didn't clearly appear from the minute referred to therein, namely the minute of 21 August 1998. And you gave an answer, having looked at the documents, that the tenure was that everything in terms of the packages had been agreed to, except in relation to the Hawk and the tanks. And you proceeded to show that those were then the outstanding issues dealt with. Now, what I would want you to do, please, is turn back to get the context to the minute of 16 July. Just give me one moment. Sorry, the minute of 13 July, which you will locate at page 260, and that is in Mr. Steyn's bundle. If you could please open that and also keep the page 6 open in front of you. If you could turn in Mr. Steyn's bundle to page 260, 260.
July 98.
Correct, and it's a meeting of the special AAC, and I asked you to keep open also DoD bundle page 6 with the decisions taken. Are you with me?
Yes, thanks, I am with you.
Mr. Casrals, in relation to the AAC meeting minute to be located at page 260, it was put to you by the evidence leader that he was not aware of any minutes held or minutes on record of the AAC in its own right. This document at page 260, is that such a minute of the AAC?
Yes, it is.
If you could then turn to page 261 of the bundle, you will notice under introduction is a paragraph 2, and it reads as follows. Due to time constraints, the meeting proceeded directly to the overall summary of consolidated results, co-presented by the co-chairpersons of the SOFCOM, open bracket Strategic Offers Committee. In the next paragraph 3, you will also notice that the results put forward by the SOFCOM are being discussed, and I want to draw your attention to the fact that each equipment type is then listed from paragraph 4 onwards. We start with the main battle tank, and in capital letters in bold, you will then see that the evaluation results are set out for each equipment type. And if you page on, you'll see it's for the submarines, for the corvettes, the helicopters, the advanced light fighter aircraft, the lead-in fighter trainer, and the maritime helicopters are similarly dealt with. And then if you turn to the last page of the minute, you'll see at page 266, at the foot of the page, under a heading Note, the last sentence reads that the valuation results of the equipment elements are contained in the SOFCOM record dated 1 and 2 July 1998. Now, what I want you to do, please, is have a look.
Last reference, I'm looking for that. 266, yeah.
Please cast your eye down the page, and underneath Minister Modisi's signature, you will see a paragraph headed Note. And in the last sentence there, we are referred to the SOFCOM record. And what I want you to do is turn to pages 268 to 276, cast your eye over them, and inform the Commission as to whether this was the SOFCOM record being presented to the AAC.
Well, Commissioners, it appears to me as though these would have been genuine, these would have been the record. And I accept that in terms of the content of the document.
Then able to confirm that in relation to each equipment type, the AAC was presented with the preferred bidder or the winner of the evaluation round, save, if I may refer you to page 262, at the foot of the page you see the lift results, and there we see there are 2 options. Do you confirm that?
You say at the foot of 262. Okay, yes, I have located it, sorry. Non-cost option ranking, is that it? British Hawk, Italian MB, the Czech, and the Yak.
Correct. You see that there is also a cost option ranking, and the Italians are at the top of the cost option ranking.
Right, I'm very clear, thank you.
Was save in relation to the lift. Does this minute reflect that in relation to each equipment type, the winner of the evaluation was put before the AAC?
Yes, indeed.
The next step in the chronology of minutes which you attended is the minute of 21 August. And if I could ask you to refer to page 316 of Mr. Stein's bundle, page 316, you see the Council of Defence minute at which you are listed as being present of 21 August 1998. You confirm that?
Yes, certainly.
At page 317, you will notice that the last paragraph is a paragraph 7.3.2, and Mr. Sheikh is said to have recorded that the team would like to brief council on 6 aspects. We needn't go through them all. The evidence leader took you there. But the first 2 are important. The lift program, whether it be the MB339 or the Hawk. And secondly, the removal of the battle tank from the packages. In referring these issues to the Council of Defence, would it be fair to say that what was being referred were the aspects which had not been clearly settled and in relation to which further consideration was required?
Correct.
Could I then ask you to turn to page 319? And at the foot of that page we see a decision recorded. The council agreed that the tanks be removed from the packages, but not from the SANDF's overall requirement. Do you recall that decision?
Yes, indeed.
Then in relation to the second controversial aspect that required further consideration, I refer you to page 321. And you will, page 321, you will notice a paragraph 7.3.24. The minister is dealing with the political decision in relation to the Hawks. That is the context. And do you see that the last sentence of that paragraph, he says, we must not prejudge, let the politicians decide. Now my question is, was that the decision of the minister to let the politicians decide the issue between the Hawk and the MB339?
Well, since nobody is opposing and disagreeing, that would have been an agreement of the meeting.
Mr. Casuals, the next event is the ministerial briefing to which I referred you, and I'd asked you to keep open page 6 of the DOD bundle. If you cast your eye across to that page at paragraph 9, can you then confirm that the decision before Cabinet really pertained to the only controversial issue remaining, which was that in relation to the lift, and that the minute of 21 August 1998 would have recorded the winners of the evaluations, and that had produced no controversy?
I think extremely clear and correct.
We have already dealt with the next 2 decisions recorded at paragraphs 10 in relation to the removal of the tanks and 11 in relation to the Hawks. The next event in this chronology is a cabinet meeting of 18 November 1998. And in that regard, I ask you to turn over a couple of pages to page 9 of the DOD bundle. And you should have there an extract from the cabinet meeting of 18 November 1998.
Yes, I do have that.
It's item 6.1, and it's headed Recommendations as to the preferred bidders for the Strategic Defence Acquisition Packages. You will notice in 6.1.1 that you are recorded as having attended this cabinet meeting, and I presume a special recordal of your attendance was required because you have explained to the Commission that you were not ordinarily a member of the Cabinet.
Precisely, and that goes for the other 3 deputy ministers present with me.
In the next paragraph, the Cabinet notes a presentation headed Department of Defence Presentation 18 November 1998. If you turn over the page, you'll see at page 10 to the end of this bundle is a document with that same heading. Are you able to confirm that this was the presentation given to the Cabinet?
Yes, I would agree, certainly.
Then, to save time, let me move to the last paragraph recorded as part of the decision. The Cabinet discussed the matter and resolved that the recommendations on the preferred suppliers for the strategic defence equipment be accepted as recommended as an interim step, and that the Departments of Defence, of Finance, of Public Enterprises and of Trade and Industry proceed with further detailed negotiations with the preferred bidders with a view to achieve affordable agreements. Mr. Casperals, can you confirm that this was indeed the discussion and decision of the Cabinet?
Yes, indeed, sir.
Having regard to this decision, and this is my last question, with the benefit of hindsight and bearing in mind your role in the decisions pertaining to the SDPP as Deputy Minister at the relevant time, have you any reason to regret your role in that regard?
No, not at all. I'm proud of my role. We were engaged in extremely historic import in relation to the security of our country, taking into account the Constitution, and indeed the first precepts of that Constitution being the security of our people, the need to attend to their socio-economic needs and upliftment. This was the big change, Commissioners. As we well know, it's common knowledge. But I make that point. In addition, unmistakably in that Constitution, is the requirement for a modern, capable, affordable defence force, well equipped to do its duties, duties being to defend that Constitution, the sovereignty of our country, its territorial integrity in its borders, for the welfare of our people and for that sustainability. And further, in terms of that Constitution, the Defence Force needed to be adequately staffed, representative of our people, and adequately equipped. And given the obsolescence of the equipment, which I have dealt with at length on Friday, thus came the need to look into how best to equip this Defence Force for its modern constitutional needs. And so we proceeded in a very transparent and open way through the white paper, through the Defence Review, and from there, along the lines that we've been dealing with here, a process of integrity to arrive at the decision to equip the Defence Force and benefit the country economically, industrially, through the arms procurement package, which was a very unique process. I have mentioned, Commissioner, that actually in the grand scheme of things internationally, whatever country you look at, what we actually were acquiring, and it's a lot of money, and it started at 30 billion, and of course in terms of currency and so on, it increased. But in the grand scheme of things for countries, equipping their defence force to do the job of their constitution It actually is not the major equipping that so many detractors make out. And one can look at the number from planes to helicopters to ships and submarines. It's actually quite small. I say it in terms of a full acceptance that there had to be trade-offs in terms of the budget. That if you put some money into budget A, you're going to deprive some of that from budget B. But governments the world over, democratic governments, need to have a balance between the socio-economic upkeep and security of their country and people and the means to defend. And from that point of view, I believe what we did was extremely significant, and it's had its results, despite a very small number of books written. But I don't believe, and I've looked at them, and perhaps the authors have, in their minds, a serious approach. But there's nothing in these books that can really be tested. They have huge generalizations. Of course, they play on the fact that they could have, and indeed we've seen some aspects of corruption which arise out of any major business transaction, be it from books for education to the building of dams to defense, and that had happened. But to try and make out it's the government of this country is off the mark. And when we see the result, I've mentioned here today, commissioners, the reference to, and we must give this time, we must look at it not as an author of a book, one or two writers, but in a very clear-cut way at the facts and do the type of audit necessary to actually understand, and this country should understand, what has been achieved in that industrial package, that business plan that Minister Joe Modise had in mind. And we could give examples. Would the Germans go on having their BMW cars manufactured in East London if we were a country without a navy, without a defense force? I give that as one example. You need to create confidence in your trading partners that you can look after the sovereignty, be it the coast, the sky, or the land. From that point of view, in doing business, it was vitally important we have something of this nature. Our region, our closest neighbors. I can recall, if I can give you a quick anecdote, the then President Chissano of Mozambique meeting with Minister Modise and myself in Cape Town. Sir, the first thing he said to us was, you've got to get those corvettes. We can't afford a navy in Mozambique. We need to protect our fishing in the Mozambican Channel. And sir, this was many years before the plague of piracy began to move down from the Horn of Africa, and with it the spread of terrorism that we see coming closer through the advent in Kenya, for example. I recall how, in terms of deciding that we needed to replace the obsolescence of the 3 Daphne submarines for our submarine fleet, if we hadn't done that, we would not have the submarine capacity. Now, there are people who say we don't need it. What does South Africa need submarines for? Sir, you don't go into the sea if you've heard that there's one shark out in that ocean. The fact that there is a submarine in your fleet gives any would-be aggressor or anybody who feels they could move in on our territorial waters a lot to think about. And we've seen a naval exercise off the Cape in which a NATO fleet of 5 or 6 naval craft in an exercise with the South African Navy came into our waters. We had a single submarine, this class that we're talking about, which sank the entire, this is an exercise, which sank that naval fleet to the consternation of the NATO admiral in charge of that fleet. This is the power that South Africa has, not to frighten people, but to look after our territory and our populace. This is the reach we have in terms of our naval craft and in terms of our Air Force and Army to cooperate as an African country with our region and with the continent, where we have, I'll end now, where we have peacekeeping.
Thank you, Mr. Coswell. That evidence has been laid. Thank you. And last for human rights. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had finished. You know, the story by Mr. Coswell was so long that I thought you had finished close examining.
There's only one missing link, which is to give Mr. Casuals the document to which he himself referred. It's the minute of 18 September 1998 at page 342 of Mr. Stein's bundle. And the passage to which Mr. Casuals referred is at the foot of page 343, paragraph 4.7.1. Mr. Casuals, am I correct in assuming that this note that Mr. Swan reported that the Deputy President and Ministers Irwin and Sekgao had been briefed in Durban and basic approval had been given to the recommendations made by the team, is the note to which you were referring?
Just please help me again. Which paragraph is this?
I'd ask you again to turn to page 343. Thank you, Mr. Casual. Then that is the end of my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Advocate DeVos.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Casrels, you are clearly passionate about the arms deal and what you perceive the advantages that it brought to South Africa. I do not doubt your sincerity in that. I just want to take you back to the 1997 Defence Review. And you will remember that in that particular review it was indicated that, and I think Mr. Crawford Brown also referred to that South Africa's greatest security threats were poverty, inequality, and unemployment. Do you remember that? Yeah. And just a moment. Mr. Commissioners, I've just received a request from my colleague, Mr. Libala. He asks for a 5-minute adjournment. He wants to have a discussion with me before I proceed with my cross-examination, and I would like to accommodate him if possible.
Okay, let's have an adjournment of 5 minutes. Thank you.
All rise.
Mr. Casuals, you confirm that you're still on the oath? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Casserols, I will repeat my question. I referred you to the 1997 Defence Review, which indicated, as I've already said, that South Africa's greatest security threats were poverty, inequality, and unemployment, and you agreed with that. As you've already testified at length, a big part of the arms deal, as you called it, the visionary approach, was the idea that there would be an enormous amount of money flowing into the country. Is that correct?
Yes.
And would that, in your view, have assisted the problems as defined in the Defence Review?
That was certainly our belief, that injection of that investment into the economy, the job creation, all the gains in that sense, business gains, industrial gains, would obviously help the economy to grow.
Am I then correct to say that it was of the utmost importance that the offset program be a success?
Yes, of course. We were expecting that and we were hoping for that.
So it then would be correct to say that if the arms deal, if the offsets were not a success, the arms deal would have had and could have had a negative impact on precisely those factors as identified in the Defence Review?
Well, I wouldn't say agree exactly with that, because you also have to take into account, Commissioners, the fact that it was our duty and responsibility to ensure that we had an adequate military capacity. In addition to the military capacity, of course, we were hoping precisely for that add-on to the economy. But it wouldn't have fallen flat if nothing had emerged in terms of that economic or industrial gain, because we would have had a military that would have just petered out, would have had no capacity. So it's a question of trade-offs in relation to that.
But Mr. Casserols, I understood your evidence to be precisely that the choices that were made, and I'm not talking about the fact that we needed certain equipment, but the particular choices that were made, for instance, the Hawk, were made with the idea that in spite of the fact that it may even be double the costs as opposed to the Italian plane, that because of the inputs, that would make it worth your while.
Yes, sure.
So to get back to my point, the question of the inputs was of the utmost importance, and the success thereof, to make the deal that was put together eventually a correct decision or a correct choice.
Let me accept that.
Now, you were not here during the evidence period when the inputs were discussed, and obviously you do not have detailed knowledge of that. I just have to set the record straight as far as what you call the critics and the writers of books are concerned. My clients are Mr. Holden, Mr. Van Vieren, and Mr. Feinstein, and they all three, in a submission to this commission, stated that as far as the evidence that they could gather is concerned, that the offsets were a disaster.
Just hold on. Advocate Eddie Foss, I'm not going to allow that question. I'm going to tell you why. There are witnesses from DTI. There are witnesses from Armscor who came and testified about offsets, about the benefits. That evidence is on record. Whatever view that Mr. Ronnie has is totally irrelevant. We now know how they've performed. In fact, I think one of the AMSCO officials said to us that in some of the offsets they exceeded their expectations. They say they exceeded their expectations. So I don't think that is a fair proposition that you put to Mr. Kazu in the light of the evidence that we have now.
May I address the Commission on this point?
And that's right.
The idea, as I understand it, Commissioners, for people to give evidence before this Commission is precisely to get different viewpoints before the Commission. And it may very well be that there were witnesses explaining that some of the offsets were a success, but it may also very well be that the viewpoints of my clients in the end are the correct ones, because it's not to say that the evidence that is already presented is the end of the road. And clearly, this Commission has not made up its mind yet as to what the real position is. So all I'm putting to this witness, which I submit I'm entitled to do, is a viewpoint of my clients who are taking part in this Commission. And if I'm not allowed to do it, then it doesn't make real sense for me to cross-examine the witness. If we were in a normal trial situation, my witness hasn't given evidence yet. I am in a position, and I should be allowed to give my witness's version, whether it's acceptable or not to the court, to the other witness to comment on that. And I think it's just fair, in view of this witness's evidence, that the offsets were such an important part of the decision-making process that he must consider the possibility that this Commission may find, because obviously this Commission hasn't found it yet, that the offsets were not a success, and I would like his comment on that.
Yeah, if at all you want to put any version to this witness, in all fairness, put all the available versions. There is evidence which seems to not to agree with what your clients are saying. Put both of them to the witness and let him respond.
I submit it's not my duty to put the other version to this witness. That is why we have evidence leaders, and they can always in re-examination put that witness.
I'm not sure whether Advocate Dufosse, I agree with you. In that case, I'm going to say to the witness, I'm going to put to the witness what is on record already. I'm going to say to the witness that DTI officials came and testified and told us about their IPs. The people from Moscow came and told about the dip. Their view is that both NIPs and DIPs, they have exceeded their expectations. And they think that, they have succeeded to a very great extent in creating jobs and in attracting investments. That is part of the evidence which has already been laid before us. Now, you can answer the question from Advocate Dufosse, bearing that in mind, what the evidence is before this comes up to now.
Well, I certainly agree. I haven't been present at the presentations made, Commissioner, which you refer to. That would accord with my understanding of the achievements and the benefits. And I've had occasion here to make reference to a person I think is possibly one of the most leading experts in our country, Johan van Dijk, and his material which I have perused, and it gladdened my heart. I've looked at the books from certain authors, and Commissioner, they just do not impress me in the least. And therefore, I totally disagree with learned counsel here in your assertion that this has been a complete failure. I disagree.
Mr. Casuals, I'm not going to take the point further, but that was not my assertion. I simply asked you whether, if it was to be found that the offsets were not a success, one could then assume that the decision to go the more expensive route may not have been a wise one. That's all I'm asking you.
Well, you see, with 2020 hindsight, Commissioner, supposing we do discover that the whole thing's been a flop, what we have to ask ourselves is, back in 1994, 98, were we taking a crazy risk with the funds of this country, or were we serious? Were we committed to what we felt was the best needs of our country? That's what I believe has to be asked. There could be all sorts of developments taking place post that 1999 period relating to ministers who come, or administrations who come and don't follow through on the commitment to the NIP and the DIP. That requires a lot of work by departments to keep up that momentum. There are aspects of the international economy and so on, which might in fact totally undermine the vision which we referred to as Mr. Modisi's at that time. So if that does happen, does that then cast Mr. Modisi and his colleagues into a position of having taken an absolutely wrong decision? The point I would argue is, what was uppermost in their minds? Did they apply their minds? Was it in good faith? And from that point of view, I must say, Madam, absolutely 100% for all of us.
Talking about whether it was a good idea to take a risk and whether it was a risk, at any of these meetings that you were present, and there were many of them, was the question of opportunity costs ever discussed? In other words, what else can we buy with this money?
You referring to how many schools and clinics? We were looking at our portion of the budget, as every department would. There were shortfalls there. We didn't blame the Minister of Finance. We looked then at other elements which we were aware of, that business plan. So in our minds very much was the question. Minister Modisi was not a hard-nosed person. He had a heart for the people that he came from. And from that point of view, of course, we were aware of what the country needed, which is why we downsized the Defence Force considerably. We cut the Defence Force so that we could come in on the budget, which was reduced to a tremendous degree. From that point of view, we were saving funds for the Treasury to go into housing and clinics and hospitals and the like. Of course, we were people of conscience in that respect, Commissioners.
Mr. Casros, if you refer to saving of money, I assume you're referring to the money that was to come into the country on the basis of the offsets.
Well, actually, I'm referring as well to the savings by downsizing the Defence Force, by creating a core force of only 30,000 full-time military people from what we had had in the past, and relying on the reserve force. This was a country, as we well know, that was highly militarized. We demilitarized this country, and credit to Minister Joe Modisi for having led us in that.
Can we return to the minute of the ministerial briefing, please? The date is the 31st of August 1998, and you will find it in Stein's bundle, well, or the bundle that was handed up by the Defence Council. Now, you already know that both Mr. Steyn and Mr. Esterhuizer were adamant in their evidence that the decision to prefer the hawk above the Italian aeroplane wasn't taken in their presence. Do you have any recollection of that meeting and who left and what happened there? Can you remember actually that some people left and some people stayed on, or what was the position?
Tried to trawl through my memory in relation to this very question, and I'm afraid I just have no recollection of that. Whether they left the meeting, whether they stayed, I'm afraid I cannot help you with this. It would be a little bit of reconstruction and guesswork.
In this minute, there's an item, you've already discussed it. It's item 9, decisions taken. The recommendations for the preferred bidders as approved by the Armament Acquisition Council was supported and approved by the members present. Now, what was the normal process? After the Armament Acquisitions Council has recommended certain bidders, where would that decision normally go to? To the subcommittee of ministers dealing with the procurement, or to the cabinet, or what?
On this occasion, it was to go through to that interministerial committee of ministers.
But I note that the minutes does not say it's minutes of an interministerial committee meeting. It specifies that it's minutes of the special ministerial briefing on the 31st of August 98 to the Deputy President, Mr. T. Mbeki, on the progress of the Strategic Defence Package Program for the SANDF at Nzinga Conference Room. So it does not purport to be minutes of an interministerial meeting dealing with the proposals.
Sorry, just to repeat, to clarify, that this would have been a decision at the AAC, and I think you asked where that would then be submitted, and that would have then gone through to that interministerial meeting 10 days later. That's my judgment of this.
Are you talking about the decision that was taken during this particular meeting on the 31st of August, or are you talking about the meeting that was the decisions that is referred to in paragraph 9 of the 21st of August by the ACC?
Sorry, I'm talking about the decision. Sorry, I think I was a bit mixed up there in the dates. This is the meeting of the 31st in Durban. And that meeting receives the report. And that report is of that AAC dated 21st August. And that's what they then approve. Is that clear?
Thank you. I understand that. So according to you, this particular meeting of which we have the minutes here, the 31st of August, was a meeting of the Interministerial Committee.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, sir.
It doesn't say so in the heading, though. It simply says it's a briefing to the Deputy President.
Well, it's a meeting to the Deputy President with those ministers who take a decision. Those ministers being, apart from Deputy President, Minister of Defence Mosioua, Minister of Trade and Industry Irwin, Minister of Public Enterprise Tau, and of course as a Deputy Minister myself. So it really, it is a committee. Minister of Finance wasn't able to be present, part of the Interministerial Committee. I think that it's not simply a briefing for the President himself. It's for a discussion amongst that group whether to take the decision or not.
When a discussion such as that takes place and there is recommendations to be discussed, especially if it's referred to in a, or contained in minutes, I assume that those minutes must have been circulated or available during the meeting.
Well, it's the slide presentation. It's a presentation that gets made at that meeting, which had been endorsed at that AAC. So that's what's presented and then decided on.
So the minutes does not reflect the true position. In other words, it should have said that the slide presentation was supported and approved by the members present, but it refers to recommendations for the preferred bidders, and one would assume that those recommendations would have been at your disposal and in the form of the minutes of that meeting of the 21st of August.
Well, without such documentation, then I'm cast in a position of having to try to remember. Did the presenter make reference with his slides to, or verbally, which he must have, to the AAC meeting? Was there minutes distributed, which you make mention of? I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to remember that. But in keeping with them simply coming and giving a report and showing this presentation, those present would be in a position to take the decision that they did.
Mr. Casrals, are you telling me that a cabinet committee meeting takes a decision and confirms that they accept recommendations contained in a minute, but that the minute is not before them to discuss?
Sorry, Commissioners, I must object to what is being put. Paragraph 9 does not refer to a minute. It refers to a meeting, and it refers to recommendations for the preferred bidders as approved by the Armament Acquisition Council, 21 August 1998. Does not imply necessarily that there had to be a minute before this particular meeting, and the witnesses already responded that there was a presentation. As you please.
Commissioners, with all due respect, if there's reference to recommendations for the preferred bidders as approved by the Armament Acquisition Council, those recommendations must have been contained in minutes. That's why there is a date, 21st of August 1998, that refers to the date of the meeting when those recommendations were made. Clearly, those recommendations must have been in some form, it must have been contained in minutes, and those minutes must have been formed part of the discussions that took place on the 31st of August in the subcommittee. And I'm asking Mr. Casrals, he said he can't remember it, but I'm asking him whether it's at all possible that ministers will take a decision as important as this without that information at their disposal. And I'm sure he can answer me.
I think let's hear what Mr. Casrals has got to say.
I think that the very fact, sir, that those ministers present took the decision shows that they were happy with the form in which it was presented to them. Whether there had been a minute referred to or not, the presentation is made, they take a decision, it's a cabinet subcommittee, and this then goes through to cabinet where it's approved. I really can't help in any other way than that, I'm afraid.
But Mr. Casrals, you gave evidence after you or during the cross-examination by Ms. Kane that as far as you are concerned, the minutes referred to, or the document referred to, let me put it, she called it minutes, but now that now that it's been pointed out that it says the recommendations, she referred to a meeting of the ACC. No, let me rephrase this. Do you agree with me that if the ACC made recommendations at a meeting dated the 21st of August, there would have been a minute minuting that.
I'm sorry, okay, which one is it? ACC?
Armament, AAC, sorry. Mr. Caswells, if the Armament Acquisition Council met on the 21st of August and made recommendations, which seems to be what paragraph 9 implies, there must have been a minute, not so.
Well, I would think so. I need to go back to the document which you referred to, that Ms. Kane presented. Maybe we could look at that to be more precise.
I'm trying to establish a simple fact, and that is it is impossible that the Armament Acquisition Council would meet and make recommendations, especially as important as these ones, without it being properly minuted. That's all I'm asking you. And you will remember that you were part of the Armament Acquisition Council.
I would concede that I would expect a minute. And you make reference to what I said earlier, which is why I'm asking that we could refer to the document that was presented.
Exactly. During your evidence, when you were cross-examined, you were referred to page 260, which is a minute of a special AAC meeting. Do you have it in front of you?
Yes, thanks for reverting to this.
And during your cross-examination, you were then led, to be fair to you, into saying that this must have been the meeting in which the recommendations were made. That's referred to in paragraph 9. Is that correct?
I object to that. It's not the proposition that was put. There was a subsequent meeting of the COD on 21 August at page 316, to which I took the witness as part of a series in order to give a context, as you please.
I must have misunderstood the cross-examination, but that doesn't really take us much further. We are dealing with a situation where a document that makes or where there's recommendations made by the Armament Acquisitions Council on the 21st of August. Those recommendations are referred to by the minutes of the meeting of the ministers that made a very important decision, correct?
I'm looking at the minute of the 21st August, Commissioner, and that's where this is minuted. This presumably would have been put before the meeting in Durban of the 31st, but I can't recall that since it's not referred to in the subsequent meeting. And that would have been minuted at 7.3.24, where the minister says, Modisi, he said we must not prejudge, let the politicians decide. And we go on to the 31st, where they're politicians taking a decision to refer that to Cabinet. So presumably this minute is presented at that meeting. Presumably. I'm not swearing to it. I can't recall.
But it is interesting to note that the paragraph 7.3.26 specifically states that the AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting.
And we don't have a copy of that. So what is there left for this witness to say?
Well, all I'm arguing with you is that the reference to recommendations of the AAC was probably minuted in a minute that we cannot find. Isn't that the more probable of the scenarios here? Instead of forcing this minute of the 7th Council of Defence as the document that was relied on for the decision-making process before the ministers.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Just to add, if I may, at that meeting, neither General Steyn, Secretary of Defence Steyn, or the others make any statement, any objection. They don't make an objection.
Mr. Casrals, I'm not sure you're talking about objections to what?
Well, you're raising the point about a minute and why the minute's not referred to in that meeting in Durban. The meeting takes place. If there's a minute and it's not referred to, I think that these members present would help the meeting and make a point about that. Because the meeting has taken place, as you've made that point, that AAC.
Precisely. That's why we argue that there must be a minute dated the 21st of August from the AAC. And that minute seems to be missing and not available. And the minutes that you were referred to were not the minutes that you used to make the decision. Otherwise, everybody would have noted the mistake.
Well, I have conceded that the minute would have been from that AAC meeting.
Mr. Casrals, I don't want to enter into any technical debate with you, but I have been asked or requested by my clients just to put the one issue of the Hawk's capabilities to you, if you will give me the opportunity to, or just give me, forgive me if I'm not very technical in my description, but you have said that as far as you were concerned, the Hawk's operational capabilities, in other words, the dual purpose of the Hawk was very important to you. Is that correct?
Yes. You've made yourself very clear.
Now, according to in my instructions, the Hawk 120 acquired via this SDP process is not considered to have the capacity to conduct combat operations and can only be used for support functions in a low-threat environment. And I will tell you where this information comes from. The official magazine of the South African Air Force, volume 30, number 3, 2010 at page 20. There's an article, you will also find it on a website, where Brigadier General John Bain, who also testified before this commission, makes this point. Do you know of this problem?
No, it's news to me. I don't know of that. And I'm not such an expert, maybe more or less in your area of expertise. But I am aware of, if it helps Commission, that this Hawk, unlike Aeromachi, which we might have bought, hardly exists. And the Hawk has been bought, something like 400 sold, recently 80 to the Indian Defence Force. So it is a very popular plane over the years, sustainable, durable, and desirable.
And just one last point on the Hawk. I think you have made that point, that the Hawk was chosen because, according to you, that had superior capabilities, but it was chosen irrespective of the cost.
I think in the evidence and reading the minutes, Minister Modise made himself very clear about this, that it was more expensive, but there was so much to gain. And that's how one buys a motor car or a house, and in this case, the equipment. You know, the principles are fairly universal.
Thank you, Mr. Casuals. I just want to correct two things. The one is you said you made your statement that was read to you by Mr. Crawford Brown in 1998. In fact, you made that statement on the 20th of August 1997 to Parliament, and you'll find that on the Cabinet website.
Well, thanks so much for helping me. I did already concede that I think Mr. Brown made that point when he made his submission. And it just goes to show that memory is not something that we can totally rely on, which is why we try to understand this through the minutes of these meetings. But I made many speeches such as that, many, in Parliament and outside Parliament.
Mr. Casuals, and lastly, just to clarify my client's position on an interpretation of a minutes of a meeting, you gave evidence that your interpretation of the minutes that you will find on page 187, it's PS 13, and more specifically 189, your interpretation of what Mr. Irvin meant when he said that in his terminology, he said if 6 billion came into the country in the form of stable and ongoing investment, we stood a good chance of succeeding. He wasn't referring to the full set-off amount. That's your interpretation.
It's my interpretation, sure. He would be in a better position to explain, obviously.
Yes, we hope to get the opportunity to do so. I just want to put it to you that that is not our interpretation, and I will discuss it with Mr. Irwin if I get the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Casuals.
Good. Well, from that point of view, one needs to go to the horse's mouth and see whether he can remember. I made it very clear how I was seeking to interpret this. Thank you.
Any early examination? Just hold on, Advocate Luban. I think Advocate Modrani must first re-examine. I'm not sure whether he still has any questions or not.
Just one issue, possibly 3 questions arising out of that issue. Mr. Castles, you have been referred to the Council of Defence meeting of the 21st of August 1998, which appears at page 316 of General Stein's bundle, up to page 321. Have you found the page?
Yes. You'll just have to bear with me. After all these briefing sessions, chairpersons, my file is virtually coming apart. So it's very difficult to get through these pages. But I'm struggling with you, and I'll have to help you.
Now, among the people who attended that meeting was the late Minister Joe Modise, yourself, and General Stein. confirm that?
General Sipiwe Nyanda, who had become the chief of the South African National Defence Force. That's a key name there as well.
Yes, I just wanted to confine myself to those three, that is Minister Modise, yourself, and Mr. Steyn. Now, at the end of that meeting, on page 321, there's this note to which you have been referred, that the AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting.
Yes.
Now, what was the procedure relating to the times and venues of meetings of the COD and the AAC?
The COD aimed to meet at least once every month. Possibly might have missed 1 or 2 months in any year. So there seemed to be at least 9, 10 meetings in a year, chaired by the minister. The venue was the Ministerial office, or we might have gone down to the Department of Defence, which had better facilities. But anyway, in the Department of Defence and Ministry building. The AAC met at specific times in terms of need to report and take or receive reports and take decisions. And very often a meeting of COD would take place and complete. We were all present, the same people at executive level, serving on COD and AAC. So the one meeting would close and then the next would open, and we'd have presentation made and its own minutes. I think we've got one example of a meeting of the COD stopping at a certain point to allow a presentation from an AAC. It became an AAC to allow a presentation from one of the work groups. And that would be in the same venue with the same people.
Yes. I think you told the Commission that you do not recall, you don't have an independent recollection of whether or not that AAC meeting did take place after the COD meeting on the 21st of August.
Yes, I'm afraid I don't. But if for some reason a report was made that, well, the presentation for the AAC was not available, then I think that would have been referred to here. Or we wouldn't have had the Secretary, Mr. Snowball, or Brigadier Snowball, making that point at 7/3/26.
Yes. Now, 10 days later, you meet in Durban, and amongst the people who were present were Minister Modise, yourself, and Mr. Steyn, among others.
Yes, Councillor.
If a meeting of the AAC had happened 10 days before that, and a decision had been taken, would that have been fresh in your mind then?
Yes, of course. At that time, I would have been very clear.
Now, the decision that's recorded as having been taken at that meeting, as appears on page 338 in particular, Where would that decision have been referred to after that meeting?
Sorry, I'm a little unclear. Are you talking about the meeting 10 days prior? That if the AAC had happened as we think it must have, that would have then come through to the presentation in Durban 10 days later, the 31st. Then the 31st meeting, that decision, would have gone through to Cabinet.
And did it go through to Cabinet?
Yes, it did. And that presentation was made to Cabinet.
Which finally took a decision on the 18th of November that year?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you. My Advocate Lubana.
I once again want to beg senior colleagues Moerana's apology. I didn't recognize him because I was looking at you, Chair. Procedurally, he ought to have gone before me, and that's what happened. I just have two questions. I want to take you back to page 321. Page 321, that's Annexure PS24. Paragraph 7.3.26. The AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting. Now, this does not at all refer to a meeting of the 13th July 1998 that we see on PS21, page 260 to page 267. Am I right? I beg your pardon, to 267. Okay, just to refresh you, page 321, paragraph 7.3.26 states that the AAC, and obviously, and this is an obvious question, we just want to complete this for the record. We are referring to the minutes of the 7th Council on Defence meeting of the 21st August 1998. To satisfy you could look at page 316. Now, yes, 316 at the top refers to the minutes of the 7th Council on Defence meeting held on the 21st August 1998. Can you see, Deputy Minister? Page 316.
It's come out, sorry. It's all in a mess. Isn't it? It's here. Okay.
Yes, you are refreshed that we are taking you through Annexure PS24, which starts on page 316, and the subject of that annexure refers to the minutes of the 7th Council on Defence meeting held on the 21st August 1998. I would like to direct your attention to page 321 and ask you an obvious question, because we have to close this without confusing each other. Look at paragraph 7.3.26 on page 321 of the self-same minute of the 21st August 1998. There's a paragraph, there's a sentence there in that paragraph saying, the AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting. Can you see? Page 321, paragraph 7.3.26. The AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting. Can you see? Now, look at page 260. Page 260 refers to the minutes of a special AAC, international offers held at 16 hours on the 13th July 1998. Can you see? Now go back to page 321. The AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting. Do you agree that this does not refer to the minutes of this meeting on page 260?
Commissioners, may I intervene at this point? I think that there may be an unfairness about to happen, especially since I won't have a chance to respond after this examination by Mr. Lebala. The point, of course, is to clarify anything that arises during the cross-examination, and if this is supposed to refer to propositions I put to the witness, I put the proposition that there was a chain of events in chronological order starting from 13 July 1998, with the minute at page 260, and progressing through to the meeting of 21 August, 31 August, and then finally to the cabinet meeting contained in the bundle on 18 November. So to now require the witness to undergo a reading test as to whether the later minutes expressly refer to the earlier is not a question that fairly arises out of the cross-examination. Quite the contrary, the cross-examination proposed the order, and the process is apparent from page 263 of the minute to which Mr. Lebala, my learned friend, is now referring, as being that the ministers now need to be thoroughly apprised of the presented preference, and that's at the foot of the page, paragraph 15. So the sequence I put was a chronological one, and it did not entail any suggestion that the later minutes referred back specifically to this particular minute of 13 July 1998.
Esteemed Commissioners, I'm really left cold by this objection. I don't know its merit.
Just hold on, just hold on. Advocate Lubana, it is clear that you will not be allowed to start raising completely new issues, except those issues which have been raised during cross-examination and which are not clear. I don't think you can start raising that point all over again. If there are any issues which are not clear after the cross-examination, probably will allow you to raise those issues with the witness.
Chair,
And I've looked at also the regulations. To be honest with you, I'm not even sure whether you're entitled to re-examine. We have been very lenient in allowing evidence leaders to do that. But then if you're going to do that, make sure that you raise issues which are not that clear as a result of a cross-examination. But then you can't start all over again.
Chair, not at all. That's the only question we're asking. The basis of this question has been traversed. My learned friend, senior colleague Kane, has just confirmed that this is a question which is before the Commission. And what if it's not clear to us? It's not clear to this team. We want clarity on it. Hence we say it only refers and does not refer. And that's the only question we're asking. We're not even taking this witness through this minutes again. All that we seek clarity about, whether senior colleague Kane wants to refer to a sequence, is just for this witness to confirm on two things that he has dealt with when led or when being re-examined by, cross-examined by senior colleague Kane. The witness was, of course, the issue of what we see on paragraph 7.3.26 in page 321 was related to the minute on page 260. And we're asking this witness that referral to the AAC that was waiting to convene after closure does not refer to what we see on page 260. That's all, yes or no? Chair, there's a basis for this question.
Okay, Advocate Lubala, you can continue that question.
That's the only question I was asking the witness. Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I'm trying to, sure. It's obviously, there's a lot of confusion here. The dates, there's the 19th August, there's then the meeting of the 21st, sir. The 19th August is headed Minutes of a Special AAC International Offers held at. That might help us, because that tends to show that the subject matter of this meeting was precisely what we were going to discuss in Durban. So the fact of that meeting 2 days later, 21st of August, where the meeting of Council of Defence ends and the AAC are waiting to convene, it might have been some other item that they were wanting to present that day. I wouldn't know. So I certainly hold to the presentation that Learned Counsel Kane made to us in relation to this presentation of 19th August. Yeah, not. I'm advised I'm wandering.
Perhaps I should say the following.
Beg your pardon, I'm reading the wrong date. That was the 13th July, yeah.
Okay, up to so far, and I just want to ask you two questions. That this one, I don't know why it's twisting and turning. Up to so far, we've seen only 2 minutes that I would qualify as minutes of the AAC. It's the minute that we see on PS21 and the joint minute of the AAC and the AASB meeting. Do you remember? Are you refreshed? The AAC only appears twice. And as far as its minutes are concerned, it's what we see on page 260. You can look at it, page 261. And that minute where there's a joint minute of the AAC and the AASB. Are you refreshed?
Yeah.
Now, I just want clarity as to whether what we see on page 321, and it's an obvious answer to avoid the confusion, whether we're looking at it backward or forward. Paragraph 7.3.26 says the AAC was waiting to convene after closure of the council meeting. Now, this does not refer to the council meeting that is being referred in the minutes on page 260. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you. Now, the last question is, look at the Department of Defense's bundle that was given to you. Page 9. I see the commissioners are conferring, and I hope they'll pick up what we are saying. Paragraph 6.1, page 9 of the DOD Defense. I would like you to look at paragraph 6.1.1. You are referred to that. You remember the discussion was attended by Deputy Ministers R. Kasrus, J.M. Tlantla, B.S. Mabandla, and G. Makas. You remember during your testimony, you mentioned that there might not have been other deputy ministers.
I said there were 13 other deputy ministers.
Okay, let's leave it. It's okay. Then there are other deputy ministers. Thank you. No further questions, commissioners.
Just one or two questions from me. This rule that the Council on Defence deals with certain matters and does not deal with acquisitions, and it is the AAC that deals with acquisitions. Is it a hard and fast rule?
I don't think so, Commissioner, because one does see the Council of Defence discussing in some meetings issues relating to acquisition.
Yeah, thanks. I'm asking that in view of what appears in this minute of the minutes of the 21st of August. there's a discussion of acquisition there. Even before that meeting adjourns, and it is stated that the AAC was to convene thereafter, there has been a discussion of acquisitions in that COD meeting. That's why I was asking that question. The next question I would like to ask you. General Stein said that the defense review was approved by Parliament, and we know that. But he says that that did not give license to the actual acquisition of armaments. In other words, he's implying that there should have been parliamentary approval before you got into the actual acquisition. Any comment on that?
The nature of the process was that running concurrently with the parliamentary process, white paper through to the defence review of 2 years or so, that there was assessment, there was discussion with companies and particularly foreign parties relating to what was being anticipated in terms of the end result flowing from the defence review. This was public, it wasn't a hidden thing. And it was accepted that whilst we went through that policy process, that investigations were being made, equipment was being discussed, was being looked at, shipbuilders were being visited and the like. We had many parties coming to the ministerial door, to trade and industry, I'm sure as well would have happened, but certainly to Ministry of Defence and to Arms Corps, discussing what the opportunities would be. Arms industries and countries who we interacted with were abuzz with the publicity arising out of the white paper defence review process. So these were taking place concurrent with each other, but the final decision would have to wait, as we see through the whole process and timeline post the defence review. But RFIs and RFOs are occurring. I think the RFOs, yes, in that timeline as well, we have certain RFOs already on stream.
Trying to ascertain, did you then obtain parliamentary approval once a decision was made to go for the acquisitions? Or was it not necessary?
No, not necessary in terms of that, to carry out business discussions. I think a whistle would have been blown if the department and Arms Corps were out of order in relation to those discussions underway. Per Steyn himself didn't object. He makes the statement post the event. You'll see from the minutes, he never said these RFIs shouldn't be going out. We've got to wait for the defence review to complete and be accepted. You see, sir, the discussions in relation to business, the RFIs through to the RFOs, it's taking place within the context, the ambit of the defence review as it develops from that white paper. So we knew quite early that basically what the Army and the Air Force and Navy were looking for were these particular items. So one was basically window shopping for most of that time and getting into discussions with parties who felt that they would be able to deliver what we wished for at the end.
Just one thing that maybe needs some clarification, maybe from me. I don't know. there was this discussion about the minutes of the 31st of August, which is signed by yourself and the other ministers. And Advocate Levala kept on asking whether it should not have been the Secretary for Defence who compiled those minutes. Maybe there was a misunderstanding about the role of the Secretary for Defence. He's not your Secretary who takes minutes. He's the Secretary of Defence in the context of a Director General of the Defence. It's not necessarily a designated scribe for minutes. Maybe that's the clarification that needed to be made that. Not for you to comment. Thank you.
Yes, precisely, I agree with that. Which is why there wasn't any puzzle over why Mr. Sheikh drew up the minutes, as far as I was concerned, and certainly the other ministers who signed.
Any questions arising from the answers that they gave to the questions arose from Judge Moses' questions? Mr. Cashel, thanks a lot for giving evidence. You are excused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Now the next question is, what do we do with Mr. Lekota? We have two options. Either we hear his evidence tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, or we take a 10 minutes break now and we continue with his evidence until we finish him. I'll prefer the latter, unless there's strong opposition to that.
Esteemed commissioners, esteemed commissioners, my colleague Mr. Ngobesa would be leading the evidence of Mr. Lekota, and he has few questions. I don't know whether the parties would like to cross-examine him. The delay might be there. He just has few questions. He could address the commission on this aspect.
I had made a proposition that we take an adjournment for 5-10 minutes, and from there when we come back, we continue the evidence of Mr. Lekota. If we told there's any cross-examination, he gets cross-examined so that at the end, by the time we leave here, we're done with his evidence. He doesn't have to come back tomorrow. There's an option that I prefer, and I've spoken to my fellow commissioner. He also prefers that, unless if there is any strong opposition to that.
I agree, esteemed commissioners. I think that's the proper recommendation.
Okay, Defence.
The problem with that, as long as I receive, I can't really reserve any rights since I don't probably have any, but we would like to hear what the witness has to say before we decide whether we can proceed with cross-examination this afternoon or whether we want to continue tomorrow morning. We only received his statement during the course of the day, and it wasn't possible for me to look at it. But it may be that we don't need an adjournment until tomorrow, so I suggest that we continue with his evidence and see if I request an adjournment.
So in other words, we must continue with the evidence of Mr. Lekota today, and we'll make an assessment after he has given his evidence.
That's correct.
In that case, can we take an adjournment for 5 minutes, and when we come back, we'll start with Mr. Lekota.
Is here, ne?
Yeah, then the light comes on.
All right.
Okay. Can the witness take the oath?
Esteemed Commissioners, before I proceed, may I inquire as to whether I'm in a position of Minister's statement, including the annexures? Esteemed Commissioners, the statement consists of 4 pages, and the annexures are 3 annexures. The first annexure starts from page 5 to 7, which is ML1, and annexure ML2 starts from page 8 to 9, and annexure ML3 starts from page 10 to 11. Thank you, esteemed Commissioners. Mr. Lekota, just permit me for the purpose of this commission just to address you as the Minister of Defense. Minister, is it correct that you depose to the statement in relation to the testimony that you are about to give today? Is it correct? Your statement consists of 4 pages. Is it correct?
That is correct.
If you turn to page 4 of your statement, the signature appearing there on, is it your signature?
It's correct. That is my signature.
Permit me just to read paragraph 1 of your statement. It says, I am the President of the Congress of the People and former Minister in the National Executive headed by President Thabo Mbeki. I succeeded Minister Joe Modise. I succeeded Joe Modise, in brackets, and later during Minister Modise's in deposition, Acting Minister Jeff Radebe as Minister of Defense, and served in that portfolio from 17 June 1999 to 25 September 2008. Under which president did you serve as a Minister of Defense from 17 June 1999 to 25 September 2008, Minister?
Under former President Thabo Mbeki.
2 of your statement, you are just mentioning that you were the Premier of East Free State from 1994 to 1996 and the Chairman of the National Council of Provinces from 1997 to 1999. Is it correct? Let's proceed to paragraph 3 of your statement, which reads as follows. The primary work undertaken by Cabinet on the strategic defense procurement packages, SDPP, had been completed by the time that I was appointed as the Minister of Defense. There's nothing contentious about this. Is it correct?
It is correct, sir.
Now, let's proceed to paragraph 4 of your statement, which states that I've been requested to appear before this commission in order to assist it, inquire and make and findings, as well as report on and make recommendation on matters pertinent to its terms of reference, which prescribe the Commission's mandate. Again, Mr. Minister, paragraph 4 just merely states that you were just requested to come and assist the Commission. There's nothing contentious about paragraph 4. Is it correct?
That is correct, sir.
Paragraph 5, you are just also mentioning the fact that we have read and also listened to the testimony given by your colleagues, and you concur what has been placed on record by them and accept that decision, that the decision were taken were sound. Is it correct? Now, if you proceed to paragraph 6 of your statement, again, let me take liberty to read it to you, which says that I'm also aware that the Department of Defense has been detailed submissions to this commission in an effort to inter alia clarify the rationale for the SDPP, the utilization of the equipment purchased, what job opportunities materialized, if any, and matters relating to whether the offsets that were envisaged materialized, so forth, and do not intend to traverse these matters in this submission. Mr. Minister, we have heard lots in regard to this paragraph, and is it correct that you also don't intend to traverse those issues mentioned in paragraph 6? Commissioners, we proceed to read paragraph 7 of the statement. It now says that it is common cause that when Cabinet took the decision to procure armaments under the SDPP, I was not a member of the IMC. Can you please explain what is IMC?
It's Interministerial Committee.
Now let's proceed to the next paragraph. The next line. It says, on my appointment as the Minister of Defense in June 1999, I took on the responsibility assigned to the portfolio and joined the IMC. My functions included giving effect to the 1998 decision of Cabinet to pursue the objectives of the Defence Review by inter alia equipping the South African National Defence Force in order that it might play the role envisaged for it in Chapter 10 of the Constitution, and in particular Section 200 to 204 thereof. Now, my question is, you mentioned your function, that one of your functions included that you have to pursue the objectives of the defense. Will I be correct that one of your functions also included signing of the contract on 3 December 1999? The contract in relation to the procurement arising out of strategic defense SDPP, strategic defense procurement packages.
That is correct. I had to carry out all of the functions that the Minister of Defense would have to carry in acquiring equipment for the Department of Defense. That's correct, sir.
When you were signing the agreement, Mr. Minister, were you satisfied that the objectives of the defense review were also met by the contract that you signed on 3 December 1999?
This is correct, Commissioners.
Commissioners, let's proceed to read paragraph 9. As I understood, Meta's Cabinet's decision was to enable the South African SANDF, which is South African National Defence Force, to protect the people of South Africa from any external threat, fulfill its international peacekeeping obligation, and be in a position to support the other components of the security cluster in securing a peaceful and stable domestic environment. Mr. Minister, is it correct if I say that what is mentioning here in paragraph 9 was also one of the objectives which was in line with the defense review?
Correct, Commissioners.
Let's proceed to reading paragraph 10. I can assure these commissioners that in the period that I was a Minister of Defense, discussion and decisions within the DOD, am I correct that DOD is Department of Defense?
Correct, Commissioners.
On DIP, am I correct to say that also DIP represents defense industrial participation?
Correct, Commissioners.
DIP packages were inclusive, well thought through, and above board in every respect. Policy-laden recommendations both from within the DOD page 4, Commissioners, and those made at IMC were framed within the context guidelines of the defense review processes. Is it correct?
Correct, Commissioners.
Paragraph 11 of your statement on page 4, it states that a particular matter was brought to my attention. It relates to decision to continue with trenches 2 and 3 regarding further hawk and gripping procurement. I confirm that I apply my mind to the matter and recommended that trenches 2 and 3 be proceeded with. Now, the question is, when was the first time this matter brought to your attention?
Commissioners, this matter served before the IMC when we were briefed about the proposal for these trenches.
Minister, if you take a look also at page, which is an annexure, page 6, which is attached to your statement, which is annexure ML1. Are you familiar with this document, Minister? This document, is it correct that it was the minutes of the 31st of August 1998? Sorry, 1999? I beg your pardon, I'm just looking for one page. Minister, now if you look at page 5 of this document, we can see that the people who were present was Mr. Timbegi. I assume at that time he was the president of South Africa. Is it correct?
That is correct, Commissioners.
Now, also there is also Mr. MG P. Lekota, Minister of Defence. I assume it's yourself.
That is correct, Commissioners.
Mr. Alec Awin, Mr. A. Aling Ewin, I assume that is Mr. Alec Awin. He was also holding the position of Trade and Industry. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioners.
Mr. T. Manuel, Minister of Finance.
Correct, Commissioners.
Mr. J.T. Khadebe, Minister of Public Enterprise.
That is correct, Commissioners.
Also invitees, Reverend F. Chikane, DG President's Office. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now there's also Mr. M. If I'm not mistaken, it's pronounced Ngwesheni, Economic Advisor, President's Office. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioners.
Now there's also Mr. J. Naidu. If I'm not mistaken, is that Jayandra Naidu who also gave evidence yesterday?
Correct, Commissioners.
Now there's also Mr. S. Sheikh, Chief of Acquisition, DOD.
Correct, Commissioners.
Now, if I may just take you to the item number 2, and if with a review to verify as to whether this issue was also dealt with. I know that Mr. Naidu yesterday mentioned that, but the reason why I'm mentioning this is because you were also present. And Mr. Naidu states the following, the minutes or item number 2 states the following: Mr. Naidu referred the members to the report handed to each member's office prior to the meeting, in brackets blue file. Mr. Naidu took the members through the structure and contents of the report and highlighted key issues for further consideration by the ministers. The reintroduction of the Gripen aircraft as training option was discussed. Trenching option was discussed, and its implications to the SA Air Force fighter capability was noted. The team proposed 3 trenches of both Hawks and Gripen. The decision to separate Trench 2 and Trench 3 from the initial approval of the core requirement is largely due to the unpredictable of the exchange rate and growth rate over a 10 to 15-year scenario. This approach allows government to readdress the issue of affordability of the total fighter aircraft requirement at a later stage if economic conditions decline. 3 cost scenarios were used to do the affordability modeling, with each scenario having its own risk factors and multipliers. Mr. Naidu addressed the issue of possible risk associated with poor communication of the government's intent to acquire military equipment above the 16.5 billion rand expenditure level and timing of such announcement. Now, my question is, this issue, was it ever also form part of the contract that you signed on 3 December 1999?
That is correct, sir.
If I may ask, what was the purpose of this Trench 2 and 3? What was the purpose of the discussion?
Commissioners, as I recall, the the amount of money required for acquiring the trenches or the entire SDP was quite a substantial amount. And the strategy here was to package the acquisition into these tranches so as to take a certain amount at a time in order to enable the executive not to bite too big a chunk, and where necessary to revise the situation guided by the ebbs and flows of economic growth. So this whole thing was a strategy to ensure that we stay within the national budget, the defense budget, to achieve this objective.
Minister, this issue of trenches, was it the only time on the 31st August 1999 that was raised before you, or was also another date where this issue was also raised before you?
Sorry, Commissioners, at a later stage, we revisited this. It was at the time when we were considering whether we should go for the second tranche or not. At that point, we then again looked at our situation and to take a decision which way to go. That was the second time it served before us.
If I may ask you, do you still remember the date on which this issue was considered for the second time? If you can.
I can't recall the date of the curve, but it was some time after.
Perhaps may I also ask you as to whether these issues was ever also discussed before the cabinet, or what was discussed on the 31st of August 1999. Can you tell this commission whether was it ever also discussed before the cabinet?
The reason we considered the matter the second time was for purposes of tabling it before the cabinet with a recommendation, having reviewed the situation, so that the final decision to take on the second tranche or not should be the decision of the cabinet itself, because we were a subcommittee of cabinet.
In your own view, do you perhaps ever come across the situation where the cabinet was supposed to apply what was provided in tranches 2 or 3 as to whether the decision should be made in regarding to whether the termination of the contract should apply or not, whether there was a risk which could have made you to decide to terminate the contract or not?
Commissioners, on the occasion when we took the matter of tranche 2 to the cabinet, it was for cabinet to consider what information we tabled before it, and therefore then on the basis of that and other considerations to adopt the recommendation or otherwise. So on that occasion we had to carry out this exercise.
Thank you, Minister. May I also just put to your attention, I know it's an issue which was not mentioned in your statement, but however, I think it's important that it should be also dealt with or responded to by you yourself. It's an issue relating to Admiral Karmaman. During his evidence or testimony, Admiral Karmaman, or relating to involving Admiral employment in regard to the fact that he was not employed, he was not supposed to take employment with a company called Tyson Group. This issue was also testified to by Admiral Karmaman. I just want to find out from you as to whether was this issue ever brought to your attention, and if so, do you still remember when?
the matter of Cameraman came before me in a manner of a question that was raised by the opposition, which drew attention to the fact that he had taken employment with one of the German companies, and that in terms of the agreement that had been entered into by ourselves, that should not have been allowed within a specified period. And I had to answer that question in Parliament. That was when this matter came to my attention. Sorry.
Now, if you say that this issue was raised in the form of the question before Parliament, permit me just to refer you to ML2, starting from page 8.
Commissioners, this is the question that was raised in Parliament, and it carries with it the response that I tendered before Parliament.
Now, if you look at this page 8, underneath there is a heading, replied. Is that the reply that you provided to the members of the Parliament?
That is correct, Commissioners.
Permit me just to read it into the record. It says that yes, in fact, for the purpose of clarity, let me start reading the questions that were posed to you. Starting from I think there are 4 questions, Mr. Minister. The first one was whether SA National Defence Force staff that were involved in arms deal contracts may not be employed within the period of 8 years by the seller of the arms without written consent of the chief of the SANDF. If so, the second question is whether a certain person, in brackets details furnished, worked for a certain period, in brackets name finished, within the 8-year ban period. If so, third question, whether he received written consent from the SANDF chief to do so. If not, why not? If so, what are the relevant details? And fourth, whether any action has been taken against any party, including the said person, in relation to this allegation, breach of supply contracts. If not, why not? If so, what are the relevant details? And the reply thereto, which was the reply provided by yourself, yes, in accordance with the covert supply umbrella agreement contract number or NO112/1, page 52, paragraph 19.2 in brackets A, SANDF staff that were involved in the acquisition of the coverts may not be employed by the seller, in brackets German frigate Consortium, without the consent of the chief of the National Defence Force or his deputy within a period of 8 years after the effective date of contract. The second line says, yes, Rear Admiral, in brackets junior grade cameraman, beginning work for the Tyson Group Marine System, in brackets TKMS, within the 8-year ban period. The reason why I'm reading this is that during the testimony, Mr. Kammerman mentioned the fact that he had a permission from Vice Admiral Mudimo. Were you aware of that permission?
The reply I tendered to the National Assembly. It's a reply that had been forwarded to my office by the department because the question had been referred to them, and it was out of the department that this reply was supplied to me, and I submitted it to the National Assembly.
So in other words, is that at the time when you were making a reply, were you unaware of the permission that was granted to Admiral Kamamen by Vice Admiral Mudim?
That is correct, Commissioners. I was quite convinced that this was the state of affairs, because the department treats these questions and they send accurate, or they're supposed to send very accurate responses. And then it's for me to then submit it to the National Assembly.
Now, also, Mr. Minister, may I also just raise an issue which obviously was also not mentioned before you, but however, it relates to the fact that one of the terms of reference that needed to be dealt with by this commission is in relation to the allegation of fraud, corruption arising out of SDPP. Now, the question is, do you still remember when and where the allegations of corruption and allegation were first time brought to your attention?
Commissioners, initially, I had read in the newspapers that there were allegations of corruption having been committed during the arms deal. More specifically, on an occasion, there were papers or pamphlets put in the pigeonholes of the members of parliament. One morning when we got there, they were all over the place, and every one of the members of parliament had a copy alleging corruption, but not indicating anybody by name or otherwise. And that's when I had the first concrete evidence that these were very serious allegations. I became quite concerned about it, not just myself, but I think lots of members of parliament and the executive were also concerned.
Now, Mr. Minister, when you received or you became aware of those allegations, did you ever, or any person from the
With respect to counsel, I'm not sure where those questions are leading us to. Unless if at all there's a specific issue that you want to raise with the former minister, do so. Allegations about allegations, copies which were found under the door, I'm not quite sure how that is going to help us.
Well, in that respect, commissioners, maybe let me just withdraw that aspect, that question, commissioners. Mr. Minister, now lastly in your statement, paragraph 12, you deal with also with the conclusion which says that the Constitution reserves to the National Executive the competence of developing and implementing national policy, and the SDPP was aligned to the mandates assigned by the provisions of the Constitution. Now, other than that, Mr. Minister, how would you also like to make conclusion before this commission? Do you want to add anything in relation to your conclusion?
Commissioners, I have nothing to add. This is the net input I, at this stage, would like to table before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have got no further questions.
Is there any person who will want to cross-examine Mr. Lekota?
Mr. Commissioner, yes, I would do.
More or less, how long do you think you might take? 10, 15 minutes. Any other person?
No cross-examination from the Department of Defence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair, I would also like the opportunity to cross-examine. It depends on a specific question I'm going to put to the witness, and if if the answer is what I think it is, I may have to ask for an adjournment so that I can look into the situation. But if he answers something differently, then I will be very short.
What is very short?
10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, thank you. Mr. Crawford-Brown.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Lekota, you were national chairperson of the African National Congress from December 1997 until 2007, as well as being Minister of Defence from 1999 until 2008. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioners.
Thank you, sir. You were not involved in the arms deal negotiations as one of the Cabinet's arms deal subcommittee. That subcommittee comprised Mr. Mbeki, Mr. Irwin, Mr. Manuel, Ms. Sikau, and Mr. Modise, your predecessor as Minister of Defence. Is that correct?
Correct, Commissioners.
And only after the negotiations had been completed and so inherited the arms deal scandal. Is that correct?
Just hold on.
I'm
sorry, Mr. Crawford-Brown. You saw he inherited what?
He inherited the arms deal.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Correct, Commissioners. I inherited the arms deal.
Thank you. Nonetheless, it is your signature on the 3rd of December 1999 with the primary contractors that committed South Africa to the arms deal contracts. The BAE and German frigate consortium supply contracts are included in the bundle that you have, and it's your signature on pages 00052 and 01351. Would that be correct?
I don't have the document, but it's correct that I signed the...
Thank you. The agreements you signed were, however, still subject to finalization of financing arrangements with banks and export credit agencies by the Minister of Finance. Was that correct? And these financing arrangements were, in fact, signed by Mr. Trevor Manuel on the 25th of January 2000. Is that correct?
Commissioner, sorry, Mr. Crawford-Brown is referring to the document, which I'm not sure whether the witness is in a possession of that document. If he perhaps can just tell us which document is he referring to.
Supply agreements.
What of the document again? No, I've got a file here. Yes, I think
Mr. Lekota, can you just switch off there? Thank you. Mr. Crawford-Brown, you were trying to explain something about the document.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, although the Minister of Defence, Mr. Lekota, had signed the supply agreements, they were nonetheless contingent upon the completion of the deal by way of the financing arrangements, which were signed about 5 to 6 weeks later by the Minister of Finance.
That is a question that we are putting to Mr. Lekota.
Yes, sir.
Chair, this witness is not in a position to deal with the subsequent questions asked by Mr. Crawford-Brown. Mr. Trevor Manuel is coming here tomorrow. He'll be in a position to answer those particular questions.
How do you respond to that?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll take it up with Mr. Manuel. But my point was simply that the loan agreements followed the supply agreements, so that the loan agreements, the whole arms deal acquisitions were contingent upon the loan agreements, which were signed by Mr. Manuel about 5 to 6 weeks later. But that's fine. I'll take this up with Mr. Manuel. Mr. Lekota, the arms deal affordability study that went to Cabinet in August 1999 warned ministers that the arms deal was a risky proposition that could lead the government into mounting economic, fiscal and financial difficulties. It also warned the Cabinet that negative economic consequences could include job losses and that the offsets could not be guaranteed. Yet the affordability study and its warnings were ignored. Is that correct?
Commissioners, they were not ignored. Cabinet considered what was tabled before it, and its collective mind was to conclude that it was in the interest of the country and it was a manageable thing to proceed with tranche 2.
Is that to say that the arms deal was the affordability study was then overruled rather than ignored?
Commissioners, as I understand the situation, it was on the shoulders of Cabinet to weigh everything and take a decision. And that decision, having considered everything, was to go ahead with tranche 2.
Mr. Lekota, Section 2171 sets out the constitutional requirements for government procurements. They must be fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. Yet, as we've heard, the cost was removed from consideration in respect to the BAE contracts and the BAE Hawk and the BAE Saab Gripen contracts. The BAE contracts amounted to roughly half the cost of the entire arms deal, and yet your predecessor, Mr. Modise, removed cost from consideration in what he termed his visionary approach. Did the Cabinet even apply its mind whether the arms deal acquisitions were illegal or unconstitutional right from inception?
I do not subscribe to that view. I was convinced, along others, that it was in the interest of the country, it was a correct thing, it was affordable, and voted along. Thank you.
Mr. Lekota, I think there would be a considerable debate on whether it could be transparent or competitive or cost-effective when price is taken out of consideration. And there are other deals made behind closed doors for political reasons, but it wouldn't have complied with the constitutional requirement. But I'll move on from there.
Mr. Brown, if we can avoid making such type of remarks before you ask a witness a question, I'll really appreciate it. Just put questions to him. Whatever you want to argue at the later stage, you can do that at the later stage.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've made the point, but I will move on, okay? You were the chairman of the ANC as well as the Minister of Defence. Would it be a fair assessment that the arms deal was the political payback by Mr. Mbeki to your predecessor, Mr. Modise, for Mr. Modise's role in supporting Mr. Mbeki's ambitions to succeed President Mandela?
I'm not going to allow that question, unfortunately. There are no basis for it.
Now, in connection with your position as chairman of the ANC after 1997, as former chairman of the ANC, could you now confirm the revelation by a senior member of the ANC's National Executive Committee, as recorded on page 177 in Andrew Feinstein's book After the Party, that the ANC funded the 1999 election from bribes connected with the arms deal? Is it true that the ANC funded the 1999 election from bribes connected with the arms deal?
I'm not going to allow that question.
Mr. Mendy Msimang was the ANC's Treasurer General from 1997 until 2007, the same period when you were the ANC's chairman. He was the ANC's representative in England during the 1960s. He subsequently became South Africa's High Commissioner in London after 1994, when BAE was lobbying to sell fighter aircraft, which the South African Air Force...
Mr. Brown, it's a very long statement. What is the question?
I'm almost there, sir. I'm almost there. The Air Force had rejected the BAE aircraft as unsuited and too expensive South Africa's requirements. Is it correct that he was Treasurer General, he was also a High Commissioner during this crucial period in the negotiations?
Commissioners, it is correct that he was Treasurer General. It is also correct that at some point he was Ambassador of South Africa. And that's all I can attest to, nothing beyond that.
Commissioners, when he delivered his financial report at the ANC conference in Polokwane in December 2007, Mr. Msimang declared he was happy to announce that the market value of all our investments stands at no less than 1.75 billion. That is what the movement owns, unquote. At 1.75 billion, the ANC had suddenly, by 2007, evolved from perpetual insolvency to one of the richest political parties anywhere in the world. Is that correct?
I'm not going to allow that question. It just got nothing to do with what we're investigating.
Mr. Lekota, the arms deal supply contracts that you signed on the 3rd of December 1999 all contained remedies in case of bribes clauses. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown. Can you repeat the question? I missed this last question.
The supply agreements signed by Mr. Lekota on the 3rd of December 1999 all contained remedies in case of bribes clauses, which he will find in the bundle of papers that have been provided to him. In the case of the BAE contracts, it is paragraph 20 on page 00048.
Chairperson, I do not know what documents Mr. Crawford Brown is dealing with. If it's the loan agreements, then those agreements have not been declassified.
Commissioner, they're in the supply agreements, not in the loan agreements.
You're referring to the supply terms agreement?
Yes, sir.
I think these are documents that they've just put in front of you there. We all were also given a copy about 5 minutes ago.
Can be tabled before the commission, and they say so. I would concede that.
Commissioner, may I read the clause in particular? It's not a very long one. The remedies in case of bribes, paragraph states, 20.1, if the seller or any of its members or representatives in relation to negotiating, entering into, or execution of the agreement has, 20.1.1, been convicted or of having committed an offence under the Prevention of Corruption Act or analogous legislation in any relevant jurisdiction by, for example, having promised or caused on its behalf to be promised, offered or given any kind of illegal gift, illegal advantage, or illegal consideration, or 20.1.2, been convicted of fraudulent, illegal, or criminal acts in obtaining or in execution of the agreement, Arms Corps and the South African government acting together may summarily cancel the agreement and claim damages resulting from the cancellation or claim an amount equal to 5% of the total contract price as agreed pre-estimated liquidated damages. Would that be correct?
Commissioners, once again, I want to say that to the extent that those may be shown in the documentation, which I don't have, I would agree with that, and I think it can only show that there was determination on the part of government that there would be no accommodation for any corrupt activity.
Mr. Lekota, in your capacities, given that statement, as both former chairman of the ANC as well as the Minister of Defence, why were those remedies of clauses not invoked to cancel the arms deal contracts when the allegations came up and the action was taken both in Germany and the United States? I would put it to you that the reason these clauses have not been invoked is that the warships and warplanes were not bought for any rational South African defence requirements, but for the bribes. The equipment itself was irrelevant. Is that correct?
I reject that entirely. The rationale for the acquisition has been clearly set out. It was approved by the National Assembly after the white paper had been tabled there. And I became part of the team to implement, and I have not come across anything to suggest to me that this major national project could have been taken to benefit one or two individuals or whatever number. So I reject this proposition.
Mr. Lekota, as an example, it's public knowledge, informed by the current Minister of Defence, that the BAE Saab Gripens are now mainly in storage because South Africa has not qualified pilots to fly them, mechanics to maintain them, and even the money to fuel them. So, in other words, there was no rational defence requirement when we didn't have the personnel to operate this equipment.
Commissioners, as far as I'm aware, the acquisition that South Africa had done under the old apartheid regime back in the 60s had become obsolete. And the reasons are tabled extensively in the literature around the time of the debate on the white paper. And I don't propose to traverse that because I was not in the National Assembly at the time or in its committees. But I'm
We say to Mr. Lekota, is that correct? Which question I put into him, because we've made a very long statement, and from there you say, is that not correct? Shouldn't you perhaps break your questions into smaller questions so that they can be in a position to follow the questions properly?
Will do, Commissioner. The Auditor General, when he made his report to Parliament in September 2000, which became the basis of the 14th report from SCOPA, which was unanimously approved by the National Assembly in November 1999, referred to the fact that no consideration had been given to the personnel requirements either for the submarines or for the fighter aircraft. And this brings home my point that the acquisitions were not made for any rational defense needs, but for bribes.
Commissioners, to the extent that I am familiar with the situation, I have already said that I am convinced, even at this moment as I sit here, that the acquisition so carried out was well-founded, based on national interest as provided in the national constitution. And I cannot, therefore, support any proposal to the contrary. As a matter of fact, if I had an inkling that this was nothing but for corruption, I probably would have refused to accept appointment as a Minister of Defense or to do something. I did it because I believed in the correctness of what I was doing. Thank you.
Mr. Lekota, I'll come back to the fact that you signed both the first and the second tranche on the BAE Gripen contracts. Yet in the second tranche, in the second case, it was after the collapse of the Rand in 2001, which brought home the validity of the concerns expressed in the affordability study that the foreign exchange risks comprised about 75% of the contracts were in foreign exchange, and this was a reckless issue to be taking on board given the international situation at the time. Yet you signed the second tranche. Is that correct?
Commissioners, I did. It often happens in economies that there are fluctuations sometimes. Something might happen that might suggest that you need to revise your position. The collective mind of Cabinet, even in that period, still indicated that it was nothing long-term, that the difficulty we were in, it was manageable, it was something that could be overcome. And once again, the collective mind of Cabinet at that time was that we had to proceed, and we proceeded.
Lekota, the point I made previously that was that poverty was the security crisis facing South Africa in the 1990s after the collapse of the apartheid government. And in fact, 3 issues are said to have defined the Mbeki presidency: Zimbabwe, the arms deal, and AIDS. At one stage, an estimated 1,000 South Africans per day were dying of AIDS-related causes. Yet one of the most bizarre arms deal offsets was BAE funding for the Virodine so-called miracle cure for AIDS, which used an industrial solvent and in which the ANC had a 6% interest. So whilst squandering billions, I would suggest, on the arms...
Mr. Brown, unfortunately, I'm not going to allow that question.
While we were spending money on the arms acquisitions, a huge number of people in South Africa were suffering the consequences of HIV and AIDS until the Constitutional Court intervened. And yet we were spending money on armaments that we did not have and had to borrow offshore. And the point I want to put is that this was a reckless proposition.
Mr. Lekota, I'm sure you have heard what the question is. In short, we are reckless by spending this type of money when people are dying of AIDS.
Commissioners, I'd like to, if I may, I must say that I was a member of Cabinet. Whenever we considered the budget, we considered extremely seriously the conditions of life of our people. At no stage did we consider that the social conditions of the people and all that goes with it is irrelevant. The only thing that is important is armaments. As a matter of fact, I think it is fair for me to say many of the people in the armed forces used to feel that I was not putting the case for increased budget for defense as much as I should. And I constantly had to remind them that whilst the country is busy steadily building capacity to defend itself, if anything were to arise, we could not ignore and I could not put pressure that everything else must be forgotten. None of us in Cabinet were just military people. I'm not even a military person. I'm just essentially an activist for the cause. In fact, when the president appointed me to this position, I wondered why he had sent me to defense. Of course, you have to make sure that it's within policy and all of that and so on. But I was one of the people continuously concerned and supportive of the budgeting that we did for education, for health, for HIV and AIDS. I still feel that we were hammered very unfairly because we put so much of the budget of health into AIDS. Live Life, what you call Love Life, was what was run under the leadership of our cabinet. And I still feel that we did far more than society acknowledged. But nevertheless, that's history. Thank you.
Chair, just to intervene at this stage, Chair. This line of cross-examination has reference and is relevant to the evidence that was given by Mr. Donaldson, particularly at page 0038 of his submission, where he breaks down the budget, paragraph 78, where he indicates how much was spent on SDP expenditure of 6 billion and 62 billion on education, 34 billion on health services, 41 billion on social security and welfare services, 13 billion on housing and community development, 13 billion on transport and communications, and 20 billion on police services, or the 2002-2003 year. I think the question should be put in a particular context.
Commissioner, it's well acknowledged that South Africa does spend a high proportion of GDP on education and health, yet as we know, tragically, it doesn't seem to filter through into results. But Mr. Lekota had touched on an issue that I'd actually cut out of my questions and which I'd now like to raise, that why he and Mrs. Madlala Rutledge, both of whom were pacifists, were appointed to be Deputy and Minister and Deputy Minister of Defence. It was rather curious appointments, which perhaps you would like to explain. But I'll finally wrap up, if I may, that Mr. Lekota, of course, has now left the ANC and is president of COPE, as he has said. In his recent campaign, he has, in fact, referred to the arms deal as one of the issues that was the genesis of the corruption that now afflicts South Africa. So, finally, with the wisdom and benefit of hindsight, would you now concur that the arms deal was a reckless proposition?
Commissioners, first of all, I'm not a pacifist. I've never been a pacifist. I was, of course, non-violent because I didn't join the armed wing of the liberation movement. So I'd like to put that first and foremost. Secondly, I have thought very carefully about what I've done through my life. When I look to the things I did as a member of the African National Congress, I have nothing to apologize for or to regret or that I think was wrong. When I did come to the conclusion that there was a serious deviation, it's when I moved on to motivate others with me to set up the Congress of the People. I identified a number of reasons why I felt at that point that I could no longer continue to report to support that.
Sorry, Mr. Lekota, if those reasons that you have identified have got nothing to do with our investigation, maybe you shouldn't even mention, you shouldn't even go there and take that route. If they've got nothing to do with our mandate, unless if you say the reasons that made it to leave the ANC have got something to do with our mandate, then probably we might allow you to continue and explain those reasons.
They had nothing to do directly with this matter here. They had to do with the principles for which we had fought and struggled. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioners. I have no further questions.
Advocate Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I just want to make sure, Mr. Lekota, if you look at page 5 of your bundle, there is the minutes of the subcommittee of the Cabinet Ministers on the Strategic Defence Package, and during this particular meeting, item 2 refers to the fact that Mr. Naidu gave a report to each member, and it was called apparently the blue file. Was that the affordability report that was contained in the blue file?
This was the motivation why, well, evaluation and then, of course, motivation why it was correct for us to proceed with tranche 2, as I recall it. I think I've made my reply, unless you want me to say something else.
But Mr. Lekota, maybe I don't understand it. I'm not here all the time, so it's possible that I've got it wrong. But this says 31st of August 1999. And it was, Mr. Naidu was there, and I understand the reintroduction of the Gripen aircraft as a tranching option was discussed, and its implications to the SA Air Force fighters capable was noted. So was the decision to continue with Tranche 2 taken in August 1999? I don't think that's possible. I think this meeting refers to the original decision to enter into the agreement that contained the Gripen and the Hawk and the various tranches included in that.
It says the reintroduction of the Gripen aircraft as tranching option was discussed, and its implication to the South African Air Force fighter capability was noted. That was noted, but to the best of my memory, the question of tranching, the decision on the tranching, had already been taken at this time. The decision to separate tranche 2 and tranche 3 from the initial approval of the core requirement is largely due to the unpredictability of the exchange rate. I think at this point, it was in this discussion that this choice had to be made about what portions we should take at a time.
My question, therefore, is whether that was the meeting during which Mr. Naidu explained the affordability report. Is that not correct?
Well, Commissioners, among other things, in order to get to this question of tranches, the fact was we could not afford to just take a decision to buy everything at a go. So in order to ensure that at every step it's affordable, this choice had to be made.
Mr. Lekota, please listen to my question. I'm not talking about the choices that you made. I simply want to know whether the affordability report was presented to you during this meeting.
I think I could assist on this issue of the history of when the tranches for the Gripen programs were agreed to, because I think it is pertinent, given the fact that the affordability study had at one point recommended that the Gripen program should be deferred or even abandoned, but the Cabinet went ahead with that with a decision in August 1999. But then there were, as you recall, the question of the option to take the subsequent batches, and by my recollection, that decision was made in 2003 or perhaps 2004, after the Rand had collapsed significantly on foreign exchange markets. But as Mr. Naidu explained yesterday, the front loading by BAE was such that the costs would be excessive in not following through with the second option. So we were actually had by BAE that it wasn't actually an option. We were drawn into this by the way the contracts were established.
Commissioners, I'm going to request an adjournment until tomorrow morning. My answer has actually been answered. My question has been answered. And I would like to have the opportunity, because I wasn't aware of the fact that Mr. Lekota was present when the decision was made to reintroduce the packaging. As now I see in this minute, I need to take instructions from my clients as to whether they want me to pursue the issue of the affordability report with Mr. Lekota. And if so, I need the opportunity to have a look at the documentation that deals with that. In any event, I won't be... well, I can't really say, I suppose. I must wait until I get instructions.
I think we are just about to tell us how long do you think we are going to be. I think we are just about to just finish it off and tell us.
I hope not to be longer than, let's say, 30, 40 minutes at the most.
30, 40 minutes. There's a suggestion that maybe we should adjourn until tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I'm not sure whether we should make it 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock in order to make sure that we start with Mr. Manuel at 10 o'clock.
Mr. Commissioners, on that point, the Lawyers for Human Rights have not received Mr. Manuel's statement or any documents that he intends to rely on, so perhaps that can also be addressed after the adjournment. Because obviously, if there is going to be a substantial statement from Mr. Manuel, we would like to cross-examine if possible, and I would need time to look at the documentation.
So tomorrow, should we start at 9 or should we start at 10 o'clock?
Chair, I was really going to propose that we complete Mr. Lekota's evidence. He has been here the whole day today. Question of the affordability report. Commissioners will recall, it came up during Mr. Alec Owen's evidence. It was declassified then. Lawyers for Human Rights were given the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Alec Owen, which offer they declined. Mr. Jayendra Naidu yesterday gave evidence about that affordability report. And there was another opportunity for my learned friends to cross-examine Mr. Jayendra Naidu. Mr. Alec Owen is coming tomorrow. Trevor, I beg your pardon. So Trevor Manuel is coming tomorrow. He certainly would be more au fait with that particular report than the present witness, who has been out of government now for some 6 years.
Advocate Defense, there's a suggestion that maybe Mr. Manuel will be in a much better position to deal with the question of affordability, better than the current witness.
Chair, the position is the following. When the Cabinet took the decision in August 1999, or the subcommittee, Mr. Lekota was part of that subcommittee. Certain facts were placed before him, and he personally had a discretion and had a role to play. And I submit that it would be in the interest of this commission that Mr. Lekota also be cross-examined on how he saw the report and the impact of the report on his decision. Clearly, every single person present at that meeting who had a role to play and who made decisions and who had a discretion may have had a different view. And therefore, maybe Mr. Manuel felt that it is more risky. Maybe Mr. Lekota felt it was less risky. Those are things that I would like to debate with the various witnesses, and I submit that it is in the interest of this commission to get that information from this particular witness. I'm not going to be unduly long. I think the Commission has seen that we don't waste time here.
So if I understand you well, it's not your intention to go into details and analysis of that report with the current witness?
Not unless it's necessary, but there are certain issues I would like to debate with the witness.
Okay, maybe in that case, let's say, postpone until tomorrow. Let's see what sort of questions comes up. One cannot make a determination up front whether the questions are fair or not. One can only make a ruling at the time when the questions are put to the witness. Fortunately, Mr. Lekota, it appears as if we'll have to come back tomorrow. I thought that, if we sit until 6 o'clock, we'll be in position to finish with your evidence. It doesn't seem to be possible. Particularly if Advocate 4 says that she still needs to prepare one or two issues that she wants to raise with you. Unfortunately, we'll have to come back tomorrow.
Well, I will oblige. I hope I can finish fairly early because I've really lost the whole day already, but this must be done though. Thank you.
And we'll adjourn until tomorrow morning and we'll
Sorry,
start.
Commissioners. From the DTI, or rather on behalf of the DTI, would like guidance from the Commissioners whether a ruling has been made regarding the use of the contracts that we've been handed, that have been handed to us in the bundle, Mr. Crawford Brown's bundle. They contain the supply agreements and the NIP terms, and we're not, we just wanted to put on record that as the DTI, we have not given any consent as to the production of the supply terms or the NIP terms up to the point that the DTI had given evidence. These contracts were not declassified, so would object the use thereof.
I'm not quite sure if what you say is correct. I'm not quite sure. I think discuss it with the Secretariat and try and clear up that question. But I don't think that your statement is correct. Try and clear it up with them, apparently, where we have been given permission to use some of this contract, the supply terms contracts. Just raise it with the Secretary. It's not necessary for us to debate it here. We'll adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Chairperson and Commissioner Mosi, I beg leave to clarify the position. I understand the question to be whether the documents that Mr. Terry Crawford Brown has made available to the various interested parties, including the witness, whether he got that from the Commission. I understand that to be the question. The documents include several copies of the umbrella agreements and the supply terms. We want to put it on record, Chairperson and Commissioner Mosi, that these documents that Mr. Crawford Brown has referred this witness to, he did not get them from the Commission. There has been, yes, there has been a new development with regard to the use of the umbrella agreements, the NIP supply terms, the deep supply terms, which issue I'll be more than willing to discuss with the official from TTI and clear it up before we part ways this afternoon. But the agreements that, or copies of the agreements that are contained in the bundle that Mr. Crawford Brown has made available to the Commission, that those copies, he did not get them from the Commission. Thank you, Chair.
No, it's just that one was not even aware of what is contained in these documents. It was this file was just put on our desk just after we had started, and one never even had an opportunity of going through them and see what is contained in these documents. Mr. Crawford Brown, you are the one who made copies of these documents.
Commissioner, I can confirm that I made those documents available. I shall also be making available tomorrow the loan agreements for the BAE contract signed by Mr. Trevor Manuel, which have been verified in court as authentic in the Cape High Court. And those documents were part of a discovery case. Not these, but they were related to the loan agreements that I obtained from a source in England over the internet.
In this copies of documents that we've put before us, I suppose these are the ones that you say that they were given to you after you served the discovery affidavit, after you served Mr. Manuel with a request to discover.
Yes, I obtained the loan agreements over the internet and the supply agreements from other sources who would also obtain them from court actions in South Africa. So I bought the supply agreements. I'm also bringing the financing arrangements that I got internationally and which have been verified as authentic.
Okay, can I make this ruling? Tomorrow morning, before we start with this matter, probably before 9, can Advocate Mduma, together with DTI and Mr. Crawford Brown, try and sort out this issue, and let's see what we can use and what we cannot use.
We'll do so, Chair.
I think in that case, then let's adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9. You know, I didn't know what was in this document. This file was just given to us just 10, 15 minutes after we sat here. But in any event, try and sort it out, and then we'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.